Hey guys, what's up back there? It's Kidbone here. I'm glad you came back to my channel, and thank you ever so much for your patience and also for especially for writing comments and giving likes to my video. And I really appreciate you guys. I'm so grateful for that. I know it's a bit frustrated at the minute for some personal reasons. I was quite busy for college at the moment, but I still do my best to produce more videos for you guys. So I don't have much time to do making videos at the moment. Okay, so I'm so happy to and to support me to keep my channel growing. That was quite good for you guys. It was so awesome. Okay, if you have subscribed to my channel to hit my bonus bell notification, and social links down below to this video, like Instagram, Twitter and Pinterest. You already seen it on the intro. Okay, so I'm going to make a conclusion of reading Tinkerbell and Friends on the final part. I guess you really enjoyed reading Tinkerbell when listening to me when I'm reading to you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. That was so good. So awesome. Also, it was amazing. So, if you're interested, feel free to write comments down below after this video. Okay, so let's go to finish off reading. The board began to pick up speed. The first cheers died out. It was so hard to start, Terence said reluctantly. But now it's going to be impossible to stop. Maybe it will just roll into the tree or something, said Beck. If we are lucky, said Angus. I think I did follow it, cried Tink. And the fairies leaped into the air to chase that off of the ball. The cannonball was rolling fast now. It bounced across the tree roots and rolled over the hill lock of grass. It was headed for Havendish stream. It's going to hit the mill, cried Jerem. This was truly a disaster. The mill was one of the most important places in Pixie Hollow. The tree picking talent fairies ground grains and nuts into baking flour of hair. And the dust talent fairies used a mill to grind Mother Dove's feathers into the fairy dust. It was also where the fairy dust was stored, all of it, an entire year's supply. At once, the same picture flashed through every fairy and sparrow man's mind. The mill smashed, the fairy dust inside blowing away with the wind. They would be unable to fly, unable to do magic. How would they even build another mill if they did not have a power of fairy dust? At the startled, Rabbit poked his head out of his burrow, but when he saw a cannonball run towards him, he quickly dived back inside. The cannonball rolled over the large toadstool, flattening it. The fairies flew helplessly behind. They could hardly bring them to watch, but just before it reached the mill, the cannonball hit a good-sized rock. It jumped into the air and changed course. Instead of crashing into the mill, the ball splashed into the stream just above it, and they had stopped wedged against the bank. The fairies breathed sighs of relief all around. They laughed and hugged each other with joy. The mill was safe, but Tink was not laughing. She did not take her eyes from the ball. As she watched, the water of Havendish stream began to back up around. Oh no, she said. The stream is blocked. Everyone stared in disbelief. Tink was right. The ball had landed in a narrow branch of a stream that fed a mill. The water slowed into a trickle. This was not good. Not good at all. If the stream stopped running, the mill wheel would stop turning. Indeed, they all heard the mill grind to the stop. Winnie started to cry, and it was not from happiness. Why didn't I think of it? This, Tink asked herself angrily. Why didn't it occur to me that once a ball starts rolling, it was everybody's guess where it would end up? She sank down to the ground. She felt completely defeated. She had taken on a challenge that was too big, and she had failed. What was going to happen to Pixar Hollow now? Well, Tink, someone said. Tink looked up. Queen Clarion was standing next to her. I guess it's time for you to come up with another idea, the Queen said seriously. This took Tink by surprise. She had thought the story was over. The ball was stuck in the stream. There was suddenly nowhere to move it now. But Granny was nodding and smiling through her tears. We know you can figure this out, Tink, she said. Look how many things you have already thought of. There has to be one more thing. Tink was astounded. Not only did the others have hope the problem could be solved, they thought she could just solve it. Wendy is right, she thought. There has to be one more thing. Tink knew she had responsibility to work out what that one thing was. The other fairies were counting on her. Yes, Tink, said Florian. It's time for your next idea. Do you want us to leave you alone? Or would you like some nice soup, what do you think? Sid, said one of the cooking talent fairies, who specialised in cucumber soup. No soup, Tink said, squaring her shoulders. I'm going to think. Tink fluttered around the whole terrible scene, trying to focus. It was hard looking at the mess the cannibal had made. Water was starting to flood the banks of a stream, turning them into the muddy pools. Toadstools and wild flowers had been scratched and flattened when the ball rolled over them. The cannibal had also ploughed through the piles of acorns that the tree picking fairies had set aside to be a ground in the meal. Now, little chips of an acorn littered the landscape. Tink stared at them. They reminded her of something. Little chips of the acorns, she thought. Little chips? I've got it! She hollered. I've got a solution. I was thinking about that the one way the whole time. The cannibal is a huge thing, right? Said Tink. It was much too heavy for us to move, and we certainly could control it once it started moving. But even if we can't move a huge thing, we can move lots of little things. Queen Bee nodded her head in understanding. Of course, she said. Of course what? Said a few fairies who didn't caught on. We going to break a cannonball into lots of tiny pieces and move them out of a pixie hollow, Tink declared. Spring, she turned a message to Tan Fairy. Ask the other pots and pans fairies to bring all the hammers and chisels they have in their workshops, and the carpenter talent fairies, they have hammers and chisels too. I have a couple of chisels, said the art talent fairy, for making sculptures. Great, said Tink. Let's weld up all the tools we need. We're going to break this cannonball up. A short time later, an array of tools was laid out on the grass next to the cannonball. The sand sorting talent fairies had piled sandbags around the ball to hold back the stream. That way, the fairies wouldn't get wet as they worked. Tink grabbed a hammer and chisel and flew to the top of the cannonball. As the best pots and pans fairy in the Pixie Hollow, Tink knew a lot about metal. For example, she knew that every piece of metal had a weak point. She put her ear close to the cannonball. She began to tap it with her hammer, inching across the surface. Bin, 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 bomb, bin. Tink stopped. She went back and tapped the stop again. Bong! Tinker had found the cannonball's weak point. Holding the tip of her chisel against the ball, Tink racked it with a hammer as hard as she could. A crack appeared. Tink racked it again. The crack grew. Everyone take the hammer and chisel. Tink told the other fairies, even if your talent is completely unrelated to breaking up the cannonballs. Give it a try. You might like it. Fairies got to work. As they wedged their chisels into the iron, more cracks appeared. The air started to win with the sounds of the metal banging into the metal. It was a sound Tink loved with all her heart. I like this, said one of the cooking talent fairies. Their speciality was making ice sculptures. It's just like chipping ice. But you don't have to be careful. Gradually, the cracks in cannonball grew. Pieces began to break off. Fairies laid them on the banks of Cavendish Stream. Soon they had broken the whole cannonball apart. A mound of iron bits sat by the stream. What are we going to do with all of this? Said Twire, a scrap metal recovery talent fairy. It's more iron than we could use in the entire year in Pixie Hollow. Tink nodded. But she wasn't really focused on what Twire was saying. She was getting another idea. Quietly, she raised hands over. I want to ask your opinion about something, she said. About fairy dust magic. Whispered her idea onto Terrence's ear. Terrence scratched his head thoughtfully. I think it could be done, he said finally. It would take a great deal of fairy dust, and the magic won't be easy. We'll have to concentrate, but I think it could work. That's what I hoped, said Tink. She flew back to where the other fairies were still working. They were almost finished breaking apart the cannonball. Tink stood on one of the bigger pieces of iron to make her announcement. Fairies, she said, we are going to get this cannonball out of Pixie Hollow once and for all. The fairies cheered. But what are we going to do with it? Asked Granny. Tink smiled and said with a wink, we were going to give it back to Captain Hook, of course. Shouting with glee, the fairies gathered up the pieces of a cannonball. There were many more pieces there than were fairies. So each fairy took as many as she could fly with. Dream took one big piece. Cedar took six small ones. Tink herself carried 3 pieces, and it took all her strength to lift off. Meanwhile, Jerem and Terence were inside the mill, filling the stacks full of fairy dust, as much as they could carry. When everything was ready, the fairies lifted into the air. It was quite a sight. For those who could see it, a great cloud of fairies flying over the landscape of Neverland, headed for Pirates Cove. Of course, the pirates themselves could not see the fairies, who were invisible to them. If Captain Hook had looked up, and just then, he would have seen hundreds of chips of iron mercilessly bobbing through the air. But Captain Hook was not looking up. As the fairies approached the cove, they could see the foul-tempered pirate rolling a small boat through the water near the shore. He was muttering to himself, "Oh, teach that ridiculously boy a lesson," he growled. "Throw my best cutlass into the sea. Will he? Thinks he can get the best of me, does he? Well, see about that, Master Peter Pan. Let's see how you like the cannibal for your dinner tonight." As Hook rolled, he looked down through the shallow water. Evidently, was trying to find his lost cutlass. The fairies were right about Hook's little boat, though hovered there, still in the cloud. "Okay," Tink cried. "Stop bringing the pieces together." The fairies flew nearer to each other. They began to fit the pieces of the cannibals together. "Now, the fairy dust," Tink commanded. Terence and the other dust talent fairies and Sparrow Man began to throw handfuls of fairy dust over the ball. Magically, the iron chips snapped into the pieces like pieces of jigsaw puzzle. The fairies concentrated, using all the magic they could muster. In moments, the cannonball was complete. It was just as it had been when it crashed into Pixie Hollow. And of course, once it was whole, it was too heavy for the fairies to hold any longer. It fell from their grasp and plummeted towards Captain Hook's running boat. Hook looked up just in time to see the cannonball fall from thin air. "What?" was all had time to say before the ball crashed into the floor of his boat. It broke through the wood and fell into the bottom of the sea. At once, the boat filled with water. Hook had no choice but to abandon ship. He swam to the shore as the boat slowly sank. The sun was setting as the fairies flew back to the Pixie Hollow, glad to finally got rid of the cannonball. The next day, Pixie Hollow had just about to return to normal. Haven stream flowed between his banks, which looked none the worse for wear. The mill was turning once again, and fairies from several different talents had pitched in to help repair the courtyard. The cooking talent fairies had spent the day making acorn soup, muffins, cookies, and bread with the acorns they had been smashed by cannonballs. Everyone was sick of acorns, but all of the broken ones had been just about used up, and nothing had gone to waste. After her wet night in Rummy's room, Tink had decided to sleep outside until her room was rebuilt. She had found a nook between the two branches when she would be sheltered from the wind and safe from owls. She had actually been quiet, happy out there, looking at the stars through the leaves of the home tree. And in the morning, what had she found by the roots of a nearby tree by her live pan bed? It had been one big dent in it, challenging to fix. Tink thought, but not too challenging. Later that day, Drink and Seda helped Tink carry the bed up to her new room. They had worked all night to get ready for her. When Grin opened the door, Tink was speechless with delight. Her new room had colando lamps just like the old ones. The rooms were repainted with silver paint to make them look as if they were made of tin. And best of all, Bess had managed to finish a new painting of for Tink after all. It was another still life of the stock pot, whisk and bridle, and it was twice the size of the old one. It's beautiful, she managed to say at last. Drain and Seda helped Tink put her bed back into place. Then Drain took another look around the room. You know, she said thoughtfully, we could decorate with the tiny cannonballs, Tink. So you would always remember your greatest challenge? It's an interesting thought, said Tink, but I am all through with cannonballs. Just then, Dulcie came hurrying up to Tink's room. She poked her head in, opened the door and waved a metal sheet. Tink, she said, do you think you can fix this baking sheet for me? I have one last batch of acorn cookies to put in the oven. It just has a little hole. I know it's hardly worth your attention, not much of a challenge. Believe me, said Tink, that is just fine with me. And, taking the sheet from Dulcie's hands, she headed for her worksheet shop, whistling. Well, I think it's now concluded of reading the Tinkerbell and Friends. Was based on Disney Fairies and a classic animated 1953 Peter Pan. Okay, so I'm so glad you enjoyed reading with me, guys. And that was a good start. That was a good ending. When Tinkerbell trying to get rid of Cannibal from the Pixie Hollow after Captain Hook outrageously destroyed the whole Neverland. Okay, so that's about it, guys, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video and listen to me when reading to you. Okay, so you had already subscribed to my channel and hit this notification if you haven't or done it already. You could look up my social links, which is Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest. If you want to interested, like, support my contents, if you're interested, and if you want to stay tuned for new contents of Read Aloud, if you're interested, you can always stay tuned, and I hope you guys had a nice day.